October 1987 brought us Crash issue 45, an issue that may be considered controversial. This was the first issue of Crash to feature a cover tape, along with a 50% hike in the cover price to £1.50. I know a lot of people like the cover tapes, although in my mind this was the beginning of the end, when magazine content slowly got squeezed out. It also compromised the covers with an amount of space taken up by the tape itself. This month is also unusual, as it is the first since issue 28 that there were no adventure games in the top 10. Let's see what was there. There are 2 games in joint 9th place this month. The first is Ocean Conqueror from Racket. This game was originally published by Hungarian software house Octosoft under the name Nautilus. This is a simulation with you taking the controls of a submarine. Robin Candy found this to be a game that takes a while before you can actually get anywhere. Although he didn't find it graphically amazing, he felt the 3D graphics were used effectively. He described it as the best submarine simulation to date and gave it 80%. Mike Dunn felt similarly about the graphics, not stunning but effective and attractive. He found this to be a likeable game worth considering for your collection and gave it 79%. Nick Roberts described it as a really good submarine simulation and found the game explodes with addictiveness once you get out of port. He felt it would appeal to most people, but only scored it at 72%. The overall score given was 77%. As simulations go, it's reasonable. We last saw a submarine simulation in issue 38 with Silent Service. Whilst that was better graphically, this seems to have the edge in gameplay. It doesn't have the instant gratification of an arcade title, nor is it as in-depth as a strategy title, but may be fine if you're looking for something between the two. Like most simulations, there's not much to see, and most of the display is taken up with your instrument panel. Solid, if unremarkable. Also in 9th place is Moonstrike from Mirrorsoft. Apparently in this game you have to take revenge on Sir Humphrey Bogus, who has said something unpleasant about your grandmother. Although really that's just an excuse for another vertically scrolling space shoot 'em up. Nick found the graphics fantastic, and the animation of the nasties to be well done and very smooth. He drew parallels with Light Force and summarised this as an ace game. He scored it highly at 90%. Ben Stone particularly criticised this for lack of originality. After having seen a year of this type of game with no great improvement in gameplay, he was sick of them. He found it boring, although praised the excellent graphics, attention to detail and beautiful animation. He scored this at 67%. Richard Eddy found this a competent variation on the traditional shoot 'em up, and like the peculiar aliens, giving it a score of 73%. The overall average was 77%. It's a game that strikes me as very similar to Slap Fight from issue 43. It's better than that game, with smoother scrolling and some nice 128K music and sound effects. But many of the criticisms I made on Slap Fight apply to this. It's all fairly monochrome, and the bullets are sometimes easy to miss. Like that game, I ask why bother doing a game like this after Light Force without adding anything new. It's just not quite enough to want to come back to. Now we have 2 games in joint 7th place. The first is Hysteria from Software Projects. This is a horizontally scrolling fighting game, you fighting your way past a host of different antagonists to ultimately defeat an evil primeval entity. Nick compared this to Ghosts and Goblins and found the colour scrolling worked quite well. He described it as a superb game with plenty of depth and gave it 76%. Richard found this graphically super, and well animated, but also an addictive and playable game. He didn't think it would offer a long-term challenge, but would provide frantic fun for a while. He gave it 80%. Ben compared this to Cobra and found the graphical style, sound and feel unoriginal. Nevertheless, he described it as good fun and gave it 78%. The overall score was also 78%. This game's certainly impressive graphically. It's got a hugely detailed landscape that scrolls incredibly smoothly, with a neat parallax effect as well. Gameplay wise it seems inspired by Green Beret and Cobra, and with a bit of Ghosts and Goblins in there as well. Nothing like as challenging as those games, which unfortunately has the effect of making this game seem a bit pointless after a few minutes play. It's a shame, as if they put a bit more gameplay into this it could be something really special. As it is, it appears to be style over substance. Also in 7th place is Solomon's Key, released by US Gold. This is an arcade puzzle game based on the coin-op of the same name. You can destroy and create blocks to make your way to a key and then the exit, against the clock whilst avoiding antagonists trying to stop you. Mike found this to have quite a lot of playability, although with small characters found this looked like a budget game. Still, he found it fun and gave it 69%. Ben described the graphics as good, although a bit cluttered when there's a lot going on. Although doubting he'd be playing it in a few months, he found it appealing and fairly addictive, giving it 83%. Nick found the graphics well defined, the animation good and the game playable. He also gave it 83%, resulting in an average score of 78%. In contrast to Hysteria, this game has chosen gameplay over graphics. The graphics do come across as a bit simplistic, but the puzzle nature of the game makes it more interesting to play. The lack of random elements makes it feel like a game that may not sustain your interest once you've done it once, but I actually found the addictive qualities for this game to be higher than any of the prior games I've looked at in this issue so far. One to take a look at if you're a puzzle game fan. In 6th place is Mask from Gremlin. This game was based on the children's toys and television series popular in the mid-1980s. You take the role of Matt Tracker, with a mission to collect and put together 8 keys, and then to rescue your fellow Mask agents. This takes place using a top-down 2D landscape, in which you can drive in any direction. Richard called this a very involved puzzle shoot-'em-up game. He found it well designed, well executed, and immensely playable. Definitely no 1-minute wonder, he gave this 85%. Mark Rothwell described this as graphically very good. Although he felt the control was fiddly, he found the game's addictiveness would keep you playing. He scored this at 87%. Paul Sumner felt that although it may have the graphical appeal of a successful game, it would be too tedious to keep you interested. Although the graphics gave a strong 3D feeling, the lack of colour detracted from the atmosphere. He only scored this 70%, giving an overall average of 81%. This is a bit of a mixture from the presentation perspective, with the basic character set on the main screen going into BBC Micro style lettering on the high score table, but the rest of the game is neat enough. The game appears colourful, even though the main playing area is monochrome. Although the inertia of your vehicle and fiddly controls make this sometimes difficult to manoeuvre, it's definitely an enjoyable game to play. The 128K sound effects are great. It's not a game I remembered, but worth taking a look at. In 5th place we have Xecutor from Ace. This is a vertically scrolling 2D shoot-'em-up for 1 or 2 players as you take on the hordes of the Xecutor. Mike found the colourful graphics made it an attractive game to play. He felt the gameplay was more fun in 2-player mode, otherwise this was just a standard shoot-'em-up with neat graphics. He gave this a score of 80%. Paul compared this to Synapse, although found it a credible clone with a few attractive variations, including the 2-player option. He described it as a playable shoot-'em-up with a superb splattering of colour, and scored it at 87%. Ben called this one of the best shoot-'em-ups he'd seen in ages. He loved the great graphics, brilliant scrolling, colour scenery and detailed super baddies. His only criticism was the difficulty of the game. Nevertheless, he scored this at 86%, given an average score of 84%. It's yet another 2D scrolling space shoot-'em-up, perhaps somewhat reminiscent of Synapse from issue 42, although vertically scrolling rather than horizontally scrolling. It's a colourful game, although the generally black background certainly makes it easier to see enemy bullets than in Slap Fight or Moonstrike. However, it's still quite a tough game. The scrolling and animation is reasonable, although not the best we've ever seen. I can definitely see this game as having an appeal to the shoot-'em-up fan. It's a good bit of blasting fun, although I'd still much rather return to Light Force or Mooncrester. In 4th place is The Roads of Plexar from Mastertronic. This is a first-person perspective game, somewhat reminiscent of Trailblazer from issue 34, in which you have to traverse a series of roads across the planet Plexar. Mark praised the pretty graphics and playability. Although frustrating, he found it addictive enough to make you want to complete just one more level. He scored at 82%. Richard recognised the similarities to Trailblazer, summarising it as playable but frustrating. In later levels when the track is upside down it becomes tricky, but he felt this added to the excitement. He gave it 80%. Robin described the graphics as excellent, and the game is simple and instantly playable. On the whole, he rated an outstanding game, one to get as soon as you can. He scored it 90%, giving an average score of 86%. This is certainly an interesting game, bearing something of a resemblance to Trailblazer, although this game seems less about blazingly fast reaction times, and more about memorising the course and making carefully considered moves. It's perhaps less frustrating than the former game, although it may take some getting used to. After each 3D phase there's a similar phase in 2D. This reminds me somewhat of Bounder, but also not quite as frustrating as that game. I can see that this game has addictive qualities, although it may seem a bit strange at first. The graphics and sound add to the gameplay, although unsurprisingly the main playing area is more monochrome than I've liked, but I'd certainly recommend this as a game. Finally, we reach this month's Crash Smashes. We have 2 in 2nd place. The first is Eyeball 2 from Firebird. This is a sequel to Eyeball from issue 39. You once again play the role of Eyeball, this time exploring some deep mines to investigate the history of your race of balls. Nick called this the most frustrating game he'd ever played, but he praised the fantastic special effects, speech and colour. He found it amazingly addictive and compelling and gave it 90%. Mark summarised it as a very playable leap around and blast everything in sight collect 'em up. He rated it slightly lower, 87%. Mike thought it an excellent game with smooth and fast graphics and challenging, fun gameplay. He described the sound as superb, calling this a great game, and being particularly impressed that it was a budget title. He scored it at 93%, and the overall average was 90%. On first impressions, this does look just like the original Eyeball, and the similar speech synthesis does much to remind you of the prequel. However, the game has at least taken a slightly different approach. Rather than vertically scrolling through a level, each level takes place on one screen. However, the feel is very similar to the first game, and certainly the difficulty of that hasn't eased up at all. Sound, graphics and animation are all excellent as would be expected. Definitely a quality game, and as a budget title even more so. Also in second place is another game from Firebird. This is Bobble. This is based on the popular arcade game of the same name. This is a 2D arcade action game for 1 or 2 players, with you each controlling a dinosaur, Bub or Bob. You defeat nasties by blowing bubbles at them, and then bursting the bubbles to reach the next level. Richard was totally intrigued by the game, saying it plays superbly, looks good, and has that one more go appeal. He praised the 128k tune which matches the frantic action of the game, and reckoned that Bobble would be one of his all-time favourites. He gave it 93%. Nick found it popping with playability and addictiveness. His highlights were the cute little characters moving well, the colour platforms and no visible clash. He scored it at 86%. Mike found it so much fun. He also called the graphics cute, and described it as remarkably addictive although easy. He strongly recommended that you buy this game, and gave it 93%, bringing the average score again to 90%. Although the Spectrum version of this game may not be the best looking, it has all the addictive qualities of the arcade original. The colours and layouts for some reason just seem a bit garish on the Spectrum. However, this is a game that you play for the fun of playing. There's nothing else really like it. The 2D arcade action on a single screen reminds me slightly of Bomb Jack, and like that game this is just as addictive. Rightly regarded as a classic, I highly recommend you play this if you haven't already. In first place this month is another Crash Smash. This is Whiz Ball from Ocean. This is another 2D arcade game. In this one you control a wizard in a space transporter ball. Your objective is to restore colour to your world by collecting colour droplets, but you can also collect extra capabilities to add to your ball. Ben called this one of the most playable games he'd ever seen. He found the smooth moving graphics to be strikingly original and not too affected by colour clash. He gave the game 92%. Nick also praised the graphics, like the spot effects and 128k tune. He found the game gets more playable and rewarding as you progress, summarising it as an ace game. He gave it 90%. Mike rated this as a classic. His comments were similar to the other reviewers, praising the brilliant graphics, excellent 128k sound, and also finding it gets better once you've picked up the extras. He gave it a score of 93%, resulting in an overall average of 92%. There have been some absolutely cracking original 2D arcade games this month, and Whiz Ball is no exception. Although perhaps frustrating to get the hang of at first until you get the power-ups, the originality of this game is superlative. Graphically the game does well, still working even within the limitations of the Spectrum's colour. It's just a whole lot of fun, the kind of game you'll come back to often, and one that you can pick up and play quickly. Another absolute classic and definitely one to try out. If you have enjoyed this, please like and subscribe to see more videos about retro computing from Logic Retro.